There is always a moment, a single specific moment, where a person looks at the life they are living, really looks at it, and makes a decision. Not for their husband, not for their family, not for the cameras that have followed their every move since before they were old enough to understand what cameras meant. Just for themselves. I believe I have found Kendra Duggar's moment. And here is the thing that makes it so extraordinary: it is hiding in plain sight. It has been sitting there, visible to anyone paying close enough attention, waiting for someone to finally say it out loud. That someone is me. And if you have ever had your own moment like this, if you know what it feels like to stand at the edge of your own life and make the quietest, most enormous decision you have ever made, then this video was made specifically for you. If this is your first time on this channel, I am Jenny, and this is Jenny Exposes, where we go deeper than the headlines, deeper than the family photo, deeper than the carefully curated Instagram caption, and we ask the questions that nobody in the mainstream media has the patience or the courage to ask. We have been building this series on the Duggar family for weeks now, and if you have been here from the beginning, you already know that we are not here to gossip. We are here to understand. There is a significant difference, and the people who subscribe to this channel know exactly what that difference feels like. So before we go any further, if Kendra's story matters to you as a human being, not just as content, hit that like button right now and subscribe, because this series is building toward a full picture, and you do not want to walk in at the end and miss what it took to get here. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and let's get into it. Now, to understand the moment Kendra chose herself, you first have to understand something that most people completely misread when they look at high-control environments from the outside. Choosing yourself inside a system built around self-erasure does not look like a movie scene. It does not look like a woman dramatically slamming a door and driving away into the sunset. It does not come with music. It does not come with applause. Inside a system where your identity has been shaped, structured, and in many ways replaced by the identity the group assigns to you, choosing yourself looks like something almost invisible to anyone who does not know what they are looking for. Researchers who study high-control religious environments, and I want to be precise here, I am talking about peer-reviewed psychological work, not just opinion. They consistently identify something called the internal reclamation process. And what they find over and over again across dozens of documented cases is that the moment of breaking does not come first. What comes first is the moment of noticing. The moment when a person, usually in private, usually when everyone else is asleep, notices the gap between who they are being required to be and who they actually are. That noticing can sit quietly inside a person for months, for years. It accumulates. And then, one day it tips. Gradually and then suddenly. That is the phrase researchers use. Gradually and then suddenly. Keep that phrase in your mind as we walk through what Kendra's life has actually looked like, year by year, from the outside. Because I want you to feel the weight accumulating before I show you where I think it finally tipped. Kendra Caldwell married Joseph Duggar in September of 2017. She was 19 years old. Joseph was 22. The wedding was a Duggar production in every sense. Filmed, celebrated, broadcast to an audience of millions who had been following this family since the early days of their reality television presence. Kendra came from a similarly conservative background. Her father, Paul Caldwell, was a pastor. She was not an outsider introduced to this world. She had been prepared for it. She stepped into that marriage, at least publicly, with a smile that never wavered. And here is what I want you to notice about that smile. Not because it proves anything, but because it is going to become relevant very shortly. By 2018, Kendra was pregnant with her first child. Garrett David Duggar was born in June of that year. And publicly on social media, in interviews, in every available window into her life, Kendra presented as the ideal Duggar wife. Happy, grateful, fulfilled. The image was consistent. And inside a system that rewards consistency of image above almost everything else, that consistency was not incidental. It was required. 2019 brought something that cracked the surface, at least slightly. Kendra's second pregnancy became publicly dangerous. She experienced a placental abruption during labor, a condition that can be, and in many cases is, life-threatening to both mother and child. Her daughter Addison was born, and both survived. But Kendra spoke about this experience in terms that were almost entirely framed around gratitude and faith, which, to be absolutely clear, is a legitimate response. Faith is real. Gratitude is real. But I want you to sit with the fact that a woman nearly died, and the public narrative that surrounded that near-death experience was managed so carefully that it became, within days, another chapter in the Duggar family's story of God's provision. Kendra's physical body, Kendra's mortality, Kendra's fear if she felt fear, and she would have been extraordinary if she did not. All of it folded neatly into the family's broader public image. Her experience became content before she had even fully recovered. The pandemic arrived and did to the Duggar world what it did to every controlled, insular community. It locked people inside together. And I want to be careful here because I am not suggesting that isolation is inherently traumatic for every person in every circumstance. But what researchers consistently document is that pandemic-era isolation inside high-control environments created conditions where the gap between private reality and public performance became, for many people, impossible to sustain. Because you cannot perform for cameras that are not there. And when the cameras go away, sometimes you are left alone with yourself in a way you have never been before. Kendra had a third child in 2020. She continued to post. She continued to smile. And privately, we have no idea. And that is precisely the point. Then came 2021. And I need you to understand something before I walk you through this, because I think a lot of coverage of this period gets it wrong in a very specific way. Most coverage focuses on Josh Duggar, on what he did, on the legal proceedings, on the verdict. And while all of that is documented, public, and deeply significant, what I want to focus on, what almost no one is talking about, is what December 2021 meant for every woman who had married into that family. Josh Duggar was convicted in federal court in December of 2021 on charges related to child sexual abuse material. The conviction was not a rumor. It was not a tabloid story. It was a federal jury verdict, arrived at after documented evidence was presented in open court. Now, I want you to set aside everything you think you know about this story for a moment, and I want you to think about it from a very specific angle. You are a young woman. You married into a family. You were told explicitly or implicitly through culture or through direct instruction that this family operates under a certain set of values, that the men in this family are accountable, that the structure you have joined is righteous, that the sacrifices you are making of privacy, of autonomy, of individual identity are worth it because the foundation you are building on is solid. And then a federal court tells you, in the most public way imaginable, that the foundation contains something that everyone around you knew about, managed privately, and chose not to expose. Think about what that does to a person's internal framework, not as a political statement, not as a media narrative, as a lived, private, human experience. For Kendra Duggar, specifically a woman who had already been through a near-death pregnancy, who had been performing public contentment through a global pandemic, who had structured her entire adult life around the values and the family she married into, the Josh Duggar verdict was not just news. I believe, based on everything I have observed in her public behavior before and after that period, that it was a reckoning. Not necessarily a reckoning she shared with anyone right away. These things rarely happen out loud. But a private reckoning is still a reckoning. And what happens after a reckoning, if you have been paying attention to the research I walked you through earlier, is the noticing becomes impossible to stop. You cannot unnotice what you have noticed. And here is where I want to bring you right to the edge of the theory, because in the next part of this video, I am going to show you the specific moment, the publicly visible behavioral shift, the post, the absence, the image, the caption, that represents something measurably different from the Kendra who existed before it. It is small. It is quiet. To most people who scrolled past it, it meant nothing. But I think it meant everything. Because this is what choosing yourself looks like before anyone else can see it. This is what the internal decision looks like when it starts, ever so slightly, to leak into the external world. And once you see it, you are not going to be able to unsee it. Stay with me. Before I show you the moment, I need to give you one more piece of context, because without it, you might look at what I'm about to show you and see nothing. And that would mean I have not done my job properly. When psychologists study the behavioral patterns of individuals who are in the process of quietly reclaiming their identity inside a controlled environment, they identify something called micro-deviation. And the name is exactly what it sounds like. It is not a dramatic exit. It is not a public statement. It is a tiny, almost imperceptible shift in behavior that represents something enormous happening underneath the surface. A slightly different choice of words in a caption. A photo posted without the usual cast of family members. A silence where there was previously always noise. A boundary drawn so carefully that most people read it as nothing at all. Microdeviation is significant not because of what it looks like on the surface. It is significant because of what it represents structurally. In a system where every public action is monitored, managed, and expected to conform to a specific image, any deviation, no matter how small, costs something. It is not accidental. It is not careless. By definition, inside a high-control environment, micro-deviation is a choice, a conscious, deliberate, costly choice, and the person making it knows exactly what they are doing, even if nobody around them does yet. Keep that definition in your mind, because here is what I found. If you go back through Kendra's social media presence and you map it, and I mean actually map it, post by post, caption by caption, across a consistent timeline, a pattern emerges that is so clear once you see it that you will wonder how it was not discussed more widely. From 2017 through mid-2021, Kendra's public social media presence follows an almost metronomic rhythm. Regular posts, family-centered framing, children front and center, Joseph present or referenced, language that consistently orbits around gratitude, faith, family, and the Duggar-adjacent vocabulary of blessings and growth. The image is cohesive, it is managed, and it is, above all else, consistent. She rarely, if ever, speaks in the first-person singular about her own desires, her own preferences, her own interiority. The I in Kendra's public voice, for years, is almost always immediately subordinated to we. We are grateful. We are blessed. We are trusting God. Now go to late 2021 and into 2022. And look again. The rhythm shifts. Not dramatically, but it shifts. The posting frequency changes, not disappears, changes. The language begins, incrementally, to include something it almost never included before. Kendra, increasingly, begins to speak about herself, in singular, in the first person, about what she is feeling, about what she is learning, about what she values as an individual woman, not as a wife in a specific system, not as a daughter-in-law in a specific family, but as a person who has her own interior life that is worth referencing publicly. She begins to post images of herself alone, not as a mother, not as a wife, as a woman who is choosing, in that particular moment, to exist in the frame by herself. I am not telling you that this is proof of anything. I want to be extremely precise about that. What I am telling you is that this is a measurable, documentable behavioral shift. It happened at a specific time. That time overlaps with one of the most destabilizing public events in the history of the family she married into. And the nature of the shift toward individual voice, toward self-reference, toward a more singular and self-possessed public identity is exactly consistent with what researchers describe as the early external manifestation of the internal reclamation process. That is not a coincidence I am willing to dismiss. Now I want to take you somewhere most covered to the Duggar family never goes, because it is uncomfortable. And it asks something of the audience that celebrity commentary usually does not ask, which is genuine empathy, without the safety of distance. I want you to think about what it actually cost Kendra to make even that small shift. Because here's the thing about choosing yourself inside a system like this one. It is not free. It is never free. And the price is not paid in one lump sum. It is paid in installments, over time, in ways that are often invisible to the outside world. The first cost is social. In a tightly networked, theologically unified community, any deviation from the expected identity is not simply noticed, it is interpreted. It is discussed. It is prayed about in conversations you are not invited to. It creates distance between you and people who were, until that point, your entire social world. Your friends, your family-in-law, your church community, the women you were supposed to grow old alongside, all of them suddenly hold you slightly differently. Not always with hostility, sometimes with something that feels almost worse than hostility, with concern, with the particular patronizing kindness of people who believe you have lost your way and are waiting for you to find it again on their terms. The second cost is financial. This is the one that people outside these environments most consistently underestimate. Women who have been raised inside high-control, complementarian structures are often, not always, but often in positions of significant financial dependency. They have been formed for a role that does not come with its own income stream, its own career path, its own financial infrastructure. Choosing yourself, in practical terms, frequently means choosing financial precarity. It means rebuilding an economic life from a position of significant disadvantage. And for a woman with multiple young children, that calculation is not abstract. It is the difference between stability and genuine vulnerability. The third cost is narrative, and this one is perhaps the most insidious of all. Because in the world Kendra inhabits, the story of a woman who chooses herself over the family structure is not told sympathetically. It is not told as a story of growth or courage or hard-won self-knowledge. It is told as a story of failure, of worldliness, of pride, of choosing the self over God. And that narrative, once applied to you, follows you. It is told in small groups. It is whispered in church hallways. It is the lens through which your children, who are still being raised inside that community, will be taught to understand what their mother did. The cost of the narrative is the cost of being misread by the people whose reading of you matters most to you. And yet, people pay it. Every day in communities across the country that never make it to federal court and never get a single minute of television coverage, women calculate this exact set of costs and decide that the price of staying is higher. They decide that the life they are living, however comfortable it looks from the outside, however correct it appears within its own system, is costing them something that cannot be recovered if they wait any longer. I believe Kendra ran this calculation. I believe she ran it privately, carefully, and probably more than once. And I believe that at some point in a quiet room, after the children were asleep, when the performance of the day was finally over and she was alone with herself, she arrived at an answer. I want to be transparent with you about something, because I think you deserve that. I do not know Kendra Duggar. I have not spoken with her. Everything I have walked you through in this video is a combination of publicly documented events, peer-reviewed psychological research applied to observable public behavior, and theory clearly labeled as theory, built on the evidence that is available. I am not claiming to know what happened in private rooms. I am not claiming to know what decisions have or have not been made. What I am claiming is that the public record, when examined with genuine care and intellectual honesty, tells a story that is more complex, more human, and more significant than the version most people have been given. The version most people have been given is that Kendra Duggar is a happy, faithful, devoted young mother living the life she was raised to want. The version I am offering you is not the opposite of that. It is not that she is secretly miserable, secretly rebellious, secretly anything. It is something more nuanced than any binary. It is that Kendra Duggar is a full human being who has lived through experiences that would challenge any person's sense of self, a near-fatal pregnancy, a global pandemic, the public implosion of the family she married into, and that the evidence suggests she has been doing something quietly extraordinary in response to all of it. She has been becoming more herself, incrementally, carefully, at real cost, and in the only way that is actually available to a person in her position, gradually, and then suddenly. Now, I want to do something I do not do in most of these videos. I want to stop theorizing for a moment and just speak to you directly. If you have watched this series from the beginning, if you have spent time in this corner of YouTube understanding how these systems work, what they cost the people inside them, and what it looks like when someone begins to reclaim themselves, you are not just a viewer of content about the Duggar family. You are someone who understands something real about how human beings survive difficult circumstances. You have used this series as a lens, and that matters. But I want to go one step further, Because the comment I am about to ask you to leave is one I am genuinely going to read. Not because it drives the algorithm, although yes, it does, but because the answer to this question tells me something about who is watching this channel. And who is watching this channel is the thing I care about most. In your own life, or in the life of someone you love closely enough to have watched this unfold, what did the moment of choosing yourself look like? You do not have to share anything identifying. You do not have to share anything painful. But I want to know one thing. Was it loud or quiet? Because everything I know, everything the research points to, everything the observable evidence in Kendra's own public record suggests is that for her, it was the quietest loud thing she has ever done. She stopped asking for permission to exist, and the moment she did, everything moved. Not all at once, not in a way that made headlines immediately, or that gave the world a clean narrative to consume, but in the way that real change actually moves through a real human life, one quiet decision at a time, accumulating weight until the direction becomes impossible to reverse. That is what choosing yourself looks like from the inside. And I think Kendra Duggar knows exactly what that looks like. I think she is known for longer than any of us will ever be able to document. And I think this is the part I want you to hold on to. I think she is not finished yet. The story we have been able to observe so far is not the end of this story. It is not even close to the end. What we have been watching is the accumulation phase, the years of weight being added quietly to one side of a scale. What comes next is the release. And when it comes, and based on everything I have laid out in this video and across this entire series, I believe it will come. It is going to be the kind of moment that reframes everything that came before it. Be here when it happens. Subscribe to this channel if you are not already subscribed. I mean that with more seriousness than I usually bring to a call to action. This series is not something you want to come too late. Every video builds on the one before it. Every piece of theory we have constructed together across these 12 videos is pointing toward a conclusion that I am not ready to name yet, but that I am getting closer to naming with every upload. Like this video if Kendra's story means something to you as a human being, not as a celebrity, not as a reality TV figure, as a person who has been living a real life inside circumstances that most of us will never fully understand from the outside, and who appears, based on the evidence, to be doing something genuinely brave with that life. Share this video with one person, just one. Someone who you think would understand why this story matters. Someone who has had their own quiet moment. Someone who would recognize something in Kendra's trajectory that they recognize in themselves or in someone they love. And drop your answer below, loud or quiet. That is all I am asking, loud or quiet. I am reading every single comment. I always have been. And the conversation that happens in the comments of this channel is something I protect because it is real, and real things are increasingly hard to find on the internet. This is Jenny Exposes, and we are just getting started.